Welcome to the recording of the webinar titled What the New Vegetation Management Laws Mean for Managing Mulga in South West Queensland. This webinar was presented on the 16th of July by Seamus Batstone from the Department of Natural Resources, Mines and Energy. This is part 2 in a series of short recordings from this webinar and is titled Information on PMAVs, Mapping, Fodder Harvesting and Thinning.
PMAVs and mapping, I had a lot of questions about this. PMAVs are fine, your PMAVs are fine. It's the main layer of mapping in the veg laws, so we always go to the PMAV first. If you had one locked in, last year or early this year, before the 8th of March, you're pretty well unaffected by the mapping changes. PMAVs applied for after the 8th of March, you could have new Cat C or Cat R on freehold land. So landholders who are contesting the Cat C, so as I said, we had a handful of landholders that didn't get PMAVs, and they're on freehold land. They now have Cat C, and they're looking at contesting that. They're one of the priorities of the Charleville office and the Roma office. So our priorities really are fodder harvesters, people who want to harvest fodder, making sure that the transition's easy for them, and also people that didn't get PMAVs, we're sort of working on helping them as much as possible. The other change that affects us with mapping is that some of the REs have been reclassified, and a good example of that is Regional Ecosystem 652, which was reclassified as of concern. And that affects how much fodder you can actually take out of that regional ecosystem under the accepted development code for fodder harvesting. So fodder and thinning, in particular, fodder harvesting, what's changed? You can only notify for 500 hectares per notification. So once upon a time, or last year, you could notify over the whole property. That's been reduced to a 500 hectare area. You can notify multiple times, but each time you'll need to complete a self-audit, and we'll have a bit of a look at that later on. The strip widths have been reduced. As you probably know, the maximum strip width used to be 135 metres from memory. It's now down to 50 metres. You have to retain 75 metres, which is similar to the 135 metre wide strip where you had to retain 165 metre wide strips. So that's narrowed down. You need to check your supporting map for your regional ecosystems, just because of those changes where a couple of them have gone to of concern. One thing that I found out was that you can still self-assess the RE type when you're fodder harvesting, but I will say, use caution with that. So you'll find in that accepted development clearing code that you can actually self-assess your RE, and we'll have a little bit of a look at that later. Thinning, as previously mentioned, there's no self-assessable code for thinning anymore. Take a look at SDAP, apply through SARA. We're suggesting people hold off for a little while, just because there is some developments in permit fees and the ease of getting a managing thickened vegetation permit. So maybe just give it a couple of months and take a look at it then. So this is what the SARA website looks like, the SDAP. So the SDAP is basically the code. I don't know if a lot of you applied for fodder permits in the old days, before any of this self-assessment came out. You'll remember you had to apply for a permit. So for thinning, that's fairly similar now. If you go into that SDAP, we'll provide a link for that. You can look at the code for applying for a permit, and it's the same sort of deal where you have a performance outcome and an accepted outcome. You can meet all the accepted outcomes and get your permit, sort of thing. So that's State Code 16, SDAP version 2.3, and we'll provide a link to that if anyone's interested in having a look at that. But basically, it's like the old days of applying for a permit. So that's just for thinning. Obviously, fodder's still free.
Thank you for watching this part of the recording of the webinar of What the New Vegetation Management Laws Mean for Managing Mulga in South West Queensland, which was recorded on the 16th of July 2018.